Hello and welcome back to F1 Analyzes. Today I have my brother, Sam Gruber. Very excited. We're going to be talking about Williams.
Great racing.
Yeah,
I like your shirt.
I have my Williams racing shirt. The back is cooler, but
Show the back.
it's like a lot of this isn't a very good chair to do it on. Can we see?
97 world champions.
Yeah.
Great year.
Okay, so the first thing that we do is I have a few questions to
Okay.
ask you. So, when and why did you start watching Formula One? This is going to be like the first time that the answer isn't because of me,
Yeah.
because it's reversed. I
This
started
is
watching because of him.
going through the previous episodes of this podcast. It was very like a very Oppenheimer. Like, what have I started?
That's true. You are like the catalyst
Yeah.
of this.
I started getting interested in Formula One or watching Formula One. I guess, I mean, maybe it might have been 2019, but like 2020, as the pandemic was starting, right before the pandemic.
That's like perfect right before the
Yeah.
best year.
I watched. I think it was only one season of Drive to Survive. Maybe two seasons had been out.
Yeah, I think 2018 was when it started.
Okay, so maybe the first two, like when the second season dropped, I think I
Yeah.
watched it. Like when it came out, I went back and watched season one, and then watched season 2.
Mhm.
And I had no knowledge of Formula One outside of like Lewis Hamilton voicing a car in
In
Cars
cars.
2.
Yeah.
um, and like I mean, other than that, like I really didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But then when I was introduced to it, I obviously Drive to Survive is an excellent introduction to the sport,
Right.
and pretty quick.
People hate it.
It's people hate it because, and now that I know more about the sport, I wouldn't say that I think it's the best lens of the sport, but as an introduction, especially introduction to an American or someone who has no knowledge of the sport, it's a good catalyst for maybe diving deeper or getting more interested in it. And like that's how I used it is I watched it and then very quickly after watching Drive to Survive, obviously that's only so much content.
Yeah.
I started watching not only actual races, but I started going on YouTube and finding, different videos and listening to podcasts and stuff. And I'm such a history fan and a history nerd that like the biggest draw for me was that and I love sports obviously as
Yep.
well. So here's a sport with a 70 plus year history that
Hmm.
I had no knowledge about. So it was like all these great battles and sports things that I enjoy in other sports. I found it in a new place, and it was all new to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really fun, especially like I had no idea what it was. You
Yeah,
started
I
watching F1 and I was what are you talking? I've never even heard of that.
it also I think it. I mean, I can't say this for sure. I like because I had seen some stuff, obviously, like IndyCar or maybe even like the second series of IndyCar. I don't remember who actually held it, but there used to be the Baltimore Grand Prix. Like I was
Yes, yeah.
there. I know that there were opportunities where I might have seen it before, but to my knowledge and like as an interest of mine, it was the first time I'd been introduced to open wheel racing. I'd only seen stock car racing and like NASCAR and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So when someone talked about race cars, like it was really weird because like I remember race cars and like wanting to be a race car driver and like thinking it was really cool and I had all these Hot Wheels of like actual
Yes, the Hot Wheels.
NASCARs
We did
and I
have
knew
those.
about Jeff Gordon and I knew about Dale Earnhardt Jr. and I knew about these people who were driving and winning when I was a kid. But at the same time, I don't think I've ever watched a NASCAR race on TV. I
I
mean, I
haven't.
went to one this year, but I think that was the first like NASCAR race I've ever like
The
actually sat down and
closest
watched.
the closest I've gotten to watching a NASCAR race on TV is the new like Netflix show for NASCAR.
Yeah, I watched that as well. But I mean,
Yeah.
I like yeah, but like it was weird because like I always thought being a race car driver was cool, but then my whole image of race car driving was NASCAR, and I didn't think that was cool. So when I finally found open wheel racing, and then again, I'm such a weirdo that like I got into like I was watching like old '90s kart series races, which was IndyCar.
You used to watch the like onboard view of like karting and stuff, didn't you? Where it's
Yeah,
like you
karting.
said there's like 26 views on the videos and
I
like half
got
of them are you.
I got really into a class of racing called Formula V, which is probably the cheapest
Dad would
form.
lose his mind if he knew that there was another like set of like formula racing.
There's so many.
I know. I told him well because I said Formula E and he was like, there's more."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, those are just like the top leagues, but like even like something like Formula Ford, like that's just a class of racing. That's
Yeah.
just a class of
So
cars. Formula Renault as well.
what's Formula V?
So Formula V is their race cars made out of at the time. So back in the '60s, obviously open wheel racing and formula racing is expensive to do.
Mm-hmm.
The most popular, most mass-produced car in the world was the Volkswagen Beetle.
Right.
So they developed this class of race car, and you could enter these races with cars that were made entirely of parts that could be found in a pre 1963 Volkswagen Beetle.
That is so specific. I can't believe that there was like a category of racing for this.
Well, because obviously, think about it. It's you were doing this. Maybe I don't know if they're writing the rule book in 1963, but it's the early '60s. You know, maybe a couple years in they cap it, but it's the early '60s. It's the most popular car in the world, so they're just saying, you know,
Yeah.
anything you can find on a Beetle, you can use in this car, and then eventually the Beetle starts changing, and they say, you know, it's all the Beetles before this year.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like the everyman's class of racing. It's still very cheap. It's harder to find parts for these cars now. Obviously, it's
Right.
not 1965 anymore.
Is that still like the
It's yeah. It's I mean, obviously they're not pulling these parts off of 1963 Beetles. They're making parts resembling the parts found on
right?
1963. But
Right.
yes, it's I believe the rule set hasn't changed. It's still all the same parts.
Okay.
But the cool thing about it is it's a class of open wheel racing where you don't need a crew. If you wanted to, you could crew yourself, you could run the whole race, you could do everything with just one person. The next cheapest class of open wheel racing is probably Formula Ford. Formula V cars, you can get a competitive Formula V car for maybe like $12,000, $13,000.
You would. I remember you sent me like a link to one time.
Yeah.
Like, I want this one day.
I'm absolutely gonna own one day.
So wait, when you say that like you can have your own crew, what about are the races not long enough where they have like pit stops?
Yeah, so Formula V, you correct.
Okay.
Um,
Because that would be insane if you have to like get out and change your
no,
tires.
that's what I mean. It's you don't have to, you don't need anyone else to
Yeah.
monitor anything or you know make any sort of pit stops. The races are short enough. It's just you. Even Formula Ford, which those cars are probably like 19, 20,000, which is like the next you know entry level class of open wheel racing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all karting is obviously the cheapest. This is once you're getting into cars.
Right, and karting isn't
Karting
that
is
cheap.
yeah. I mean that's still like if you're running a season of karting, that's gonna run you like
Dude,
10K.
I went to
to
try to go to
4K.
Autobahn the other day, and I looked at the prices, and it was like 50 for 2 races, and I was like, I no,
I love Autobahn.
I know,
Do
but
you
I
remember
was
the
like,
last
I
time
can't do that.
The last time we were
That
there,
was the only time I've been there.
it was the only time you've been
Yeah,
there.
I want to go back.
Dude, I was going at it with that one kid. He had really good lap
I
times.
didn't know how racing worked yet, so I kept just like crashing into you.
It was all
and
just.
you were getting so.
It was yeah, because you were
'Cause
like
I wasn't doing it properly.
you were
That's
like
fair.
trying to get ahead of me, but it's just qualifying
wasn't-
format. It's just
I
it was
know.
just all just lap time.
Yeah,
and
I
was
didn't
running.
understand, and I also wasn't even following the racing line.
I was like, yeah, you didn't. Oh, you probably didn't know what a racing line was.
No.
I was probably 80 pounds heavier than that kid, and I was running like 0.2 of a second behind him, and it was driving me insane. I couldn't like every lap I would get like 1/10 of a second closer, and I just like ran out of time. But I was so much heavier than him.
Yeah.
I was drifting. I was throwing my weight around to drift around corners.
That sealed the deal for me liking the sport. Us going there.
Yeah,
Because we did that, and Mom had to stop because she was getting dizzy.
that was the first time that I think I had been in like a go-kart or it's like driving something fast like that in like a race format.
Yeah.
Since I had started playing the video game and like really learned
Ooh.
about like racing lines and like learned about breaking into apex or like coming out of apexes and stuff like that.
I want to start playing the video game, but I have to like get all the shit.
Yeah.
That was when I started. So when you like go to
This
Autobahn
is
or whatever,
we're very off
topic. That's okay. You go karting, they have the brake and the gas,
Mm.
and that was the first time I realized that it was like you
You're
use
using
two
both feet.
feet.
Yeah.
And ever since then, because I wasn't doing very well in karting, ever since then, when I don't drive with two
Okay, I
feet,
thought
no,
that's what
no,
you were gonna
no, no,
say, and
no,
I got worried for a second.
that would be insane. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. You're gonna break your leg.
No, but I do drive
Cause a crash.
where like I have like I put my foot up as if there's like a fake pedal, so when my right foot goes down onto the brake, my left foot also goes down. But then opposite when it's on the gas, the other one's up. So I'm like I've been building that muscle
That's
for
good.
like 3 years. So I'm just preparing for the next time I'm at Autobahn.
You gotta. Do you want to do any sort of like actual racing in your life? Like, would you like?
I,
Obviously, you don't have the money to maybe do it now, but
yeah.
like, you want to have a job, have real money, like get a cart, run a season of karting, like do something like that, or even just go out and do track days.
Yeah, I would love to do that if it's ever a possibility.
Yeah.
I don't know if it ever will be.
No, I mean getting a cart and doing track days—that's a couple grand a year. You can swing that.
We'll see. It depends.
Hopefully, you will have a job where you have a couple
Hopefully,
$1,000s to spend
hopefully,
recreationally, and if that's what you choose to do with
yes.
it.
Hopefully, I'll have a job where I won't have to pay to go to a track and do karting or something.
You're still young. I think you have a narrow, short-minded vision of it. Hopefully, one day you'll belong to a track, and you'll have
Hopefully, one
it'll.
day I'll own a track.
Okay, well, yeah, sure.
Is that better for wider view? Favorite team? I don't know if I know.
I don't know if I really have a favorite team. I mean, like like currently, yeah, no, I don't think I have a favorite team. I have a hard time like picking a favorite team if it's not something I'm born with. Like most of the sports that I wasn't passed down a favorite team, I'm more just a fan of the sport.
Yeah.
And I would say that for F1, like I had favorite drivers and I have favorite drivers, but there's not a team that I guess I root for more than others.
Right. Okay.
There's teams I root
And
against.
who do you root against?
I
Least favorite team. That's the next
well,
question.
I always just in any sport, especially one that like, I'm just kind of into like I find myself rooting against Mercedes just because when I started watching the sport, they were so dominant.
Yeah.
And like the same with Red Bull, like it's just they're the front runners, so it's
Yeah.
I just kind of naturally I'm rooting for someone that's not at the front of the pack.
It's interesting because, well, I guess that makes sense because like you've like said before that you like Ferrari. I don't know if that's because of the drivers or you like the team.
Well, Vettel was definitely my favorite driver when I started watching the sport.
Right.
And he was at Ferrari at the time.
I've chosen Vettel as my favorite driver on my own, by the way.
That is true. Because most of my Vettel love came from learning the history of the sport, and I liked him for his Red Bull years,
Yeah.
which is ironic because I would have hated him
I know.
during his
Back
Red Bull
then,
years
I would
if I was
hated
watching the
him.
sport at the time because I don't like these front runners and
Yeah.
I don't like these dominant teams,
I
so I wouldn't have liked him. But looking back on it, I loved it so much and I
it
appreciated it so
it
much.
was so weird because I started to like Vettel because I saw like everything that he was doing outside of the
Yeah, he's a
sport. I
great person.
liked. He's a great person. His interactions with people are very nice. Everyone talks very very highly of him. And then I went back and looked at his history, and he was like the original Red Bull guy, and I was like, "What have I done?" Like,
You have such you Your hate for Red Bull is a little irrational.
it's a joke most of the time. You know, I don't actually hate them.
I don't know.
Red Bull lives in my mind rent free. Like,
I agree.
I think about them constantly.
You'll see Red Bull. We'll see like a Red Bull delivery truck.
We saw one the other day.
Yeah, going down the street, and she'll point it out. Like Red Bull is sent. Like Red Bull knows that she doesn't like them, and that they're sending them out.
They're
And
like
she's like,
spies.
I walk into stores now, and there's a Red Bull fridge. Right, like that's always been there.
I swear it hasn't.
It's always been there.
No, they're taking over.
No, it's like it's just when you learn about something, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere.
No, I know. I do know that rationally.
Yeah.
And like I swear I'm not an insane person, like I promise. I don't actually hate them. I respect them. I know they're just a random energy drink and they're just good at marketing. That's what they do. I think sometimes it's kind of fun to play into things and make
No,
it bigger than it is. And that's like
that's
the point of
That's
life.
that is absolutely one of the best things about sports is it gives you something meaningless to construct or to direct your ire at.
Favorite driver?
Currently my favorite driver is probably Fernando Alonso.
Okay,
Um,
I like Alonso. Have you ever seen his TikTok?
no, I have never seen his TikTok.
Really?
I'm surprised he's on TikTok. First
It's
off,
so
I haven't had
funny.
TikTok in close to
Yeah,
3 or 4 years now. So I don't see a lot of TikToks, but he's an old man and it surprises me. His
they're really funny. Like, I don't know who is running
so
his
he's not
team.
running it.
Well, I assume not. Like, he's the one
Well,
posting
I
it.
don't see his content, so I don't know what it's
Oh,
like. You know, does it seem like a 44-year-old man
no, no,
or
it doesn't.
41, 42, whatever he is?
It does not.
Okay. So it's like, okay, it's some
Yeah,
intern from
and
the
someone
Aston
else.
Martin
Yeah,
team
but
that is in charge of
he's
Fernando
so
Alonso's TikTok.
willing to do them.
He's always, he's,
It's
but like,
so fun.
I think people gain a tremendous amount of wisdom when they travel, when they wander.
maybe this is just because I came into the sport when I came into the sport, but like he has this like statesman vibe to him just because he's like older. But then
Yeah.
you go look at stuff from like when he came into the sport and he's just like this little fucking not 5'5" French dude wearing like a puka shell necklace. And,
French?
huh?
He's not French.
Spanish,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
He was driving for Renault.
yeah.
Then that's what I was thinking of. But yeah, Spanish dude showing up to like the races with like two supermodels.
Yeah, he
And
did have the
who-
puka shell necklace.
Puka
You're
shell
right.
necklace, two supermodels who both tower over him. And his stupid little glasses. Do you know what picture I'm talking about?
The second you said puka shell necklace, I could picture
Like
it.
I think of like yeah, like so like when I
Yeah.
think of Fernando Alonso, when I think of like why I love Fernando Alonso, it's like it's stuff like that. It's stuff like he has a quote, I think it's from the 2006 championship, I think it is, when he's talking about like him and Schumacher.
Breaking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's saying,
I know where
I
you're
know
going.
Michael, or I know Schumacher's gonna break because he has like a wife and kids at home waiting for him. Like that's the
That's
Fernando Alonso
insane.
was ready to die because he was like, I want to be the late breaker into this corner, or him jumping out of the Renault car doing his little arm
Oh,
flap and
yeah.
shit. Like
He's fun.
he's
He's a
fun,
lot
yeah,
of
he's
fun.
fun, and
And the fact that people call him a rookie every year because he just keeps. He's still there.
I know it's ridiculous. It's crazy. Not only is he still there, but just how good he is.
He is. He's great.
Like you saw it really more last year when Aston had like a competitive car towards the
Yes.
end. Like I mean, just he was dominating Stroll in the same
Yeah.
car, and I know Lance Stroll,
He still is.
Williams driver.
He was a Williams driver?
Lance Stroll when he came
Oh,
to the
you're
sport,
so
yeah.
right. You're
Yeah,
right.
he was a Williams driver, and like I know he's not the best driver, and you would hope anyone in the other car is going to do better than Lance Stroll, but I mean Nando was killing him.
Did you see that when they re-signed Stroll, Aston Martin made a statement like, we assessed the driver market before picking Stroll? It's like, who are you bullshitting right now? Like,
I hope that they actually did, but like by that they were just like, "Hey Max, you want to come drive?" And he was like, "No," and they're like, "All right, Lance, I guess you're in the seat again." I mean, Vettel is up there with my favorite of all time. Nigel Mansell, I enjoy. Like, there's a lot of guys that, and shout out the Bring Back V10's podcast by the
Yes.
race, I will say, because that's where, I mean, there's like 10 seasons now of probably 12 plus episodes of that, and they focus on anything in the V10 era. It might be a specific race, and they'll go into like the storylines from that week and
I
part of
like
the
when
race.
they do specific races and go into the storylines.
It's
'cause
great.
they get people like from like who were working then,
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
they like they retell it as if it's like happening.
Mhm.
It's so great.
Yeah. So like there are a lot of guys that I've listened to so much of how they're interacting with the media back then that like I just kind of love their personalities.
Mhm.
Like I mean, Senna and Prost, like that whole rivalry, like just some of the quotes that they were giving to media, like they just didn't care.
That's
And it was so
why.
different. It was so different before the internet where like they
Mhm.
know like I'm gonna say this and like like Prost could say something negative about Senna in the race and Senna's not gonna hear the quote until the next morning.
Yeah.
Whereas, now, like, literally someone's going to put that on Twitter, and, like, 20 minutes later, a driver's going to be asked about the comment. So, like, these guys are kind of just letting it fly. The guys that jump out at me are, like, Mansell, Button, Vettel, Fernando Alonso,
What do you think of Schumacher?
Michael.
Yes.
Um, I mean, like, he's the Jordan of the sport. I have nothing but the utmost respect for him, but, like,
I feel like I
if you
like him
ask me
like
right.
by default.
Mhm.
I said I feel like I like him like by default because he's like Vettel's favorite.
Yeah.
So he's like my
Yeah, and,
favorite's
like, I mean,
favorite.
Michael, it's literally, it's the best comparison you can make is a Wayne Gretzky or a Michael Jordan, where you can't have the conversation in the sport without him.
Yeah.
And, like, he's he did something at a time that was so great that even if people achieve something that's similar or even surpasses it later in their career,
Yeah.
because of when he did it and how he did it, he'll probably, if not remain the greatest, remain in the conversation with the greatest.
That's exactly what you have with people talking about him and Lewis.
Yeah, it's Lewis to Michael, I think, is a great, like, Jordan to LeBron comparison.
I agree.
They're not completely 1-to-1, and I have some opinions, I guess, more about Michael Jordan and LeBron James being better than him.
I thought you were talking about Hamilton.
No, I think Michael is certainly a better driver, but that's where Michael has he has that mix that Jordan and LeBron have, where they're both at the top of the conversation for talent in the sport, and then they're also at the top of the conversation for achievement in the sport.
Yeah.
And a lot of drivers who have the talent, or maybe are the greatest talents, for whatever reason, maybe it's something like Senna, where, tragically his life's cut short, or it's, just something like a guy like, this isn't the best example, but Jenson Button, who I just thought of, who was a world champion, and starts at a great team in, like, Williams in 2000, but then quickly is relegated to something like BAR, and then kind of struggles through, like, goes to Honda, and just, like, because the team didn't put together around him, he never reaches the level of achievement, regardless of what his talent is.
Yeah. I like the concept of someone watching this who, like, doesn't know much about F1 yet, but knows a little, and, like, has seen recent seasons, hearing you say, like, a great team like Williams in the 2000s, and being like, what are you talking about?
I mean, we'll get into it, but Williams Williams is the pinnacle of the sport maybe not the pinnacle of the sport, but they're up there for 2 decades.
Okay, 2 more questions, and we're going to do this in the span of 5 minutes.
Okay.
At the most. Least favorite driver. Do you have, like, obviously you're someone who's not going to say that you have, like, I feel like a definitive, like, you don't hate any of the drivers or anything. But
correct.
Lance?
I don't like Lance because I don't think at this point he deserves to be there. And I have such a weird, I think people don't give Lance Stroll any credit.
I agree.
When he should get some credit. And, like,
yes.
There was a time when Lance Stroll probably, obviously his dad was always involved and always had money, but there was a time when Lance Stroll legitimately was one of the 20, drivers that should be on the grid.
Yeah.
I don't want to say what, I don't know. There's always going to be, like, little outliers, but he earned his spot at one point. It's outlived that, and I don't think he should be there. And then, because he's on a team with Fernando, and I like Nando, I guess I have somewhat of an emotional stake in Aston Martin, even if they're not my favorite team.
Yeah.
That, like, I feel like he's blocking them from, being as good as they can be, and maybe letting Fernando, I can just have more fun in these last couple of years. I was going to say, like, compete for a championship, but obviously Lance doing better doesn't do anything for Fernando, but, even just, like, if they had another better driver there, maybe they're developing their car better. Something like that.
Is there anyone else besides Lance?
I don't like Yuki. I agree with that. I think he's whiny. I really like him not wanting to work out and stuff on Drive to Survive.
Yeah.
Really rubbed me the wrong way.
Fair.
He's also so short.
He is very short.
I know that's not, like, I guess maybe.
He's 5'3". He's an inch taller than Mom.
Just how can you trust someone like that?
Do you have a favorite team principal?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I like Toto. Like, I think I like competent people. I think I said that the other day.
You did.
So, like, I think Toto runs a good team.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the history of Williams now. The first thing is it starts with Frank Williams. Frank is the founder of Williams. Yes,
Sir Frank Williams?
is it Sir Frank Williams?
I believe he was knighted.
Was he really?
I think so.
Okay. Sir Frank Williams. He worked as a mechanic and a driver and a team manager, all like for himself and like creating his own team.
Yes, he
Uh,
was. He was knighted.
huh, huh.
Sir Francis Owen Garbett Williams.
And in 1969, he joined F1 with his own racing team. And then in 1976, he ended up selling it to a Canadian businessman named Walter Wolf, not related to Toto Wolff.
Correct.
Different spelling. And then Frank was fired from the team.
In 76.
In 76, yeah. And then it was recalled Wolf Racing, that team. And then in 1986, Frank Williams ended up getting into a crash that paralyzed him from the neck down. That's just like a fun fact. But then
I don't know if "fun" is the right word.
That's true.
I mean, that's an interesting fact.
It's not very fun. He got into before the crash. He got into business with Patrick Head.
And we should say, she says the crash happens in 87 or 86.
86.
He gets fired from his team in 76. It becomes
then-
Wolf Racing. 77, the next year,
Yeah.
is when him and Head
I shouldn't have written that other thing
yeah,
there.
it's not like they took time away from the sport. Him and Patrick
him
Head,
and
who obviously becomes very powerful and is with the team for a long time, they found Williams Racing.
Yeah. So, Frank and Head got together immediately after and founded Williams. And so Patrick Head was an engineer, and he was very good at his job, very innovative.
I want to say he was at McLaren before.
I'm not sure
I guess
where he
maybe
was
don't quote me
before.
on that, but
I don't really know his actual history. I just know his history from Williams on.
okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously he's most famous for Williams.
Yeah. But he went into business with Frank, and then they set up the team together. Oh, I found it. Williams Grand Prix Engineering.
There we go.
And then where they set up, because they didn't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
You have this mechanic and this guy who has like run his old team and failed, basically. So they had like no money, and they set up in an old carpet warehouse, and they actually broke in like before getting the key to like start working on it.
That's awesome.
Which I think is hilarious.
That's very funny.
Yeah. So they got to work right away. They really cared about this, and they actually ended up, after they made like a little bit of money, they ended up buying a wind tunnel, which is like a huge part of the sport now, and focusing on aerodynamics.
Yeah.
And then...
And also, like, I mean, I think it's really important to highlight this because I guess people who are fans of the sport now or maybe know the sport from Drive to Survive, like, they see these huge factories and, like, these teams of hundreds of people.
I think they had, like, 17 people.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally dudes in a factory running this. Like, the way F1's structured is... it's not just 10 teams on the grid. Like, a lot of teams are entering weekends, but still only 20 cars qualify. So there might be 20 teams going out there with 24 cars, but only 20 are getting in the race.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. So it's not F1, this global race series. It's dudes racing Formula One cars.
Yes. That's true. That is very confusing, I think, because it's become such a big thing, and then you go back a little bit and it's like it really was just like dudes in a warehouse.
Yeah, it's very much, it's like when you go back and you read about like baseball in like the 10s and 20s, and there's like 17 leagues in America and like 4 teams or like 6 teams in New York, and you're just like, how were all these teams good? Some of them weren't. Some of them had money to put together a team for one season, and if one thing went wrong, everything was folding.
It is really weird to think about that, because even still, like, you still have engineers who are, like, really just, like, in factories, like, building. And that's why I think people get pretty annoyed with all the, like, glamification. Is that a word?
Ramification, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Of the sport, because then you have like other people coming in just like being like, I can do this. It's like those are literal mechanics and like engineers.
Yeah. But I also want to, I think it's so important to highlight that because this isn't, they're not backed by a works project.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even backed by an auto chassis partner.
Yeah.
Um, they're not the only people doing this. A lot of people are trying to do this. It's Frank Williams and Patrick Head are so successful and they're actually good at it that they're able, there's a reason that Williams is still a team today.
Yeah.
They have this much success early on with this small team.
Yep. 100%. And then in 1979, they got their first win. So if you think he got kicked out in 76, they started working on this 77. By 79, they have their first win. That's a pretty quick turnaround.
Absolutely.
With just like 17 dudes in a warehouse.
Yeah.
That's incredible. In 80 was their first championship win.
Their first driver's championship or their first constructors championship?
Both.
Both.
Yes. They won with Alan Jones, and they won both.
All right, we're going to say this right now. The Williams team got 9 constructor championships in its history. We're not talking about that anymore. We're going to talk about drivers' championships.
Yeah. Fair. That's fair. So the drivers' championships were in 80. That was Alan Jones. 82. I don't know who that was. Do you know?
I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
Head, no.
Well, it does matter, but... 87 was Prost. 92
Mansell.
was Mansell. 93 was...
Prost.
Oh, you're right, because it went back to Prost.
Yeah, it comes
93
back.
was Prost, and then 96 and 97 were both Wilder.
No, 96, remember, Damon Hill.
Oh, right, 96 was Damon Hill, and then 97 was
Jacques Villeneuve.
Jacques
I just looked it up. 82, Kiki Rosberg. Respect to Kiki Rosberg.
Oh, yes, it was
Nico's
Kiki
father.
Rosberg. Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's pretty cool. Both him and his son, were drivers' champions.
Yeah, that's insane.
I don't know. Is there anyone else that can say that? I mean, there's a lot of, obviously, Max Verstappen, Jos Verstappen, both had drivers.
Hills? Phil Hill? Is that the same Hill?
I'm not sure.
I feel like there's 3 Hills.
Damon Hill is the son of a champion. Graham Hill.
Graham
That's
Hill.
what it is.
Okay.
And then the Rosbergs.
Sorry,
Shout
Graham.
out the Hills.
Shout
That's
out
cool,
the
though,
Hills.
that both of the father-son duos to win world champions, one of the halves came from Williams. Yeah. That's actually really cool.
That is cool.
It's a
Shout out
it's
Williams.
a family business. It's a Williams family owned, and they got family driving for them.
And they had family takeover.
They absolutely did.
So then, I guess so. Once Frank Williams passed, Claire Williams.
But Frank Williams passed
way later.
2019?
Something like that. Like
pretty recently.
Recent
he
years.
gave up control. I want to say in
Yes.
the 2015, 2012.
Yeah, and then once Patrick had stopped running it, then I don't know if it was right after, but Claire Williams, who is Frank Williams' daughter, took over as team principal.
Is she still the team principal?
No.
No, she
was there for a few seasons, and she didn't do very well, unfortunately, and she ended up stepping down. And then James Fowles took over, who used to be an engineer at Mercedes. Alain Prost.
We made history. We had such a period where, almost not one day or 1 week that somebody does not talk to me about that. So we realize more now, 20, 30 years later, what we have done.
Very interesting guy.
Hell of a guy.
Hell of a guy. He's driven for McLaren, Ferrari, Williams.
Yes.
I'm sure other places like starting.
I think, he's French. I don't know if he started out with Renault. I'm not positive, but then I believe he founded a team, Prost Racing, which was
Yes.
around for a couple of years in like the late 90s.
Yeah.
Well, maybe only a season or two, but I believe he was one of the drivers for one of the seasons as well as the owner.
Yeah.
But yes, Alan Prost is known for McLaren in the late
McLaren.
80s, or McLaren in the 80s.
In the 80s.
He goes to Williams in 86.
I think so, because then the next year he wins with Williams.
Yeah, and then 87 he's the drivers' champion
Yeah.
with Williams.
So Prost had a very interesting dynamic with Ayrton Senna. They had a rivalry while they were teammates at McLaren, and that caused Prost to leave.
Yeah, he got out because he didn't want to be with Ayrton.
And then you were just talking about his clause in his contract.
Yeah, so a big part of Prost going to Williams was, he didn't want to be teammates with Senna anymore.
Yeah.
And I believe Prost returned to Williams in the 1991 season. No, that's not right, because 1992, when Mansell wins the championship, his teammate's Flavio Briatore, who he wipes the floor with. Flavio was a pretty good driver for McLaren and gets a lot of credit for developing that car, but holy shit, he could not drive it. 93, they forced Mansell out after winning the Drivers' Championship, mind you.
Yep.
Because they want to bring in Alan Prost from McLaren. He's not happy with Ayrton and that team, and he wants a change. And he agrees to the contract, but he agrees to the contract on the stipulation that they're not going to go out and try to court Ayrton. So they put a clause in his contract that says that he can veto who the second driver is. And almost instantly, Frank Williams tries to sign Ayrton Senna, and Prost vetoes it for 93.
Yeah.
And then, but the clause was only in the contract for 1993. So just the next year, Prost gets word that they're going to sign Senna. So Prost retires from the sport, and in a show of good face, I believe Williams paid like his whole salary, and like they've converted it to like a signing bonus or something like that. To basically be like, we know we're screwing you over by signing Senna, but sorry, we want Ayrton. So they signed Senna for 94, and then, maybe not obviously, but obviously tragically, 4 races into the season, this one Senna loses his life.
Yeah. Their rivalry was weird because again, shout out to the V10 podcast, because you had sent me like an episode about them.
Yeah.
And their whole thing was basically they had a deal at one of the races that whoever was leading into the first turn would be like, they wouldn't fight.
Mm-hmm. And this is while they're teammates.
Yes.
1 and 2 in the Drivers' Championship.
Yes. So they made that deal. They like shook on it and everything. And then they did that going into the turn or whatever, but then there was a restart because there was a crash.
Mm-hmm.
And at the restart, I believe
Senna.
Was he first? No.
No, Senna was behind
Yeah,
Prost.
so Prost went first into the turn, and then Senna ended up overtaking him. And
then refusing to give the position back.
Yeah. So then they both, like, Senna felt like because it was a restart, their agreement didn't count, and Prost felt like it did, and that he had broken his word. So then they just hated each other the rest of the time.
Yeah. And I mean, it manifests in some pretty intense moments. Like, is it Senna that crashes into Prost in 90 to secure the Drivers' Championship?
I think so.
I could be getting my years wrong, and honestly, even my people wrong.
I don't know years, but I think it was Senna.
I mean, there's literally situations where teammates are crashing their cars into each other to stop one from scoring points. The team is still fighting for a constructor championship. That's what allocates funds for the next season, and it's so personal and so toxic that they're wrecking $1 million cars. That's just to screw each other over.
That's insane. Yeah, people talk about the time with Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes, but like, go back a little further and you'll find this shit.
Yeah.
The worst.
And not only that, but they're doing it when it's so much less safe.
Yeah,
Like,
they don't even have the
they're
halo.
trying to kill each other.
They basically are.
And that's, by the way, a lot of what all this stems from, their animosity for each other. It's not like Alan Prost is the only person that doesn't dislike Senna and Senna's driving style. I think it's very akin to a Max Verstappen, more so than a Max Verstappen, where the other drivers on the grid are saying the way he's driving is unsafe for the rest of us. And at times it was. I mean, he was so aggressive and he was pushing his car to such limits that at times you could make the argument that it was unsafe for the other people on the track, even and himself.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, it ends in tragedy that 94 Williams was not a good car. It was not a good car. And he put it on pole in 3 of the first 4 races. So he's dragging performances out of this car and he's pushing so hard. And unfortunately, it leads to the ultimate disaster in that situation.
Yeah.
And I mean,
the 30-year anniversary, I think, was recently.
Mm-hmm. And it sounded especially in the Williams story, is such a weird kind of like footnote because him and Frank Williams have this great relationship for many years, and they're almost always kind of trying to find a way to get each other together, and they're always kind of flirting with each other, and eventually it finally happens. But then it's just he shows such promise, but then it's just so tragically short.
Yeah.
And I believe the Ayrton Senna logo was on the Williams car. It might still be on the Williams car. This is a man that drove 4 races for the team, and I mean, literally at least through the 2020s. I feel like I remember recently they took it off, but it was on the car for 30 years.
I mean, that's
that
just goes to show
how impactful it was. Yeah, absolutely.
It was a huge tragedy, and he had still so much left to do in the sport. Nigel Mansell.
I think the astonishing thing for anybody, especially for me, is how quickly everything just comes back. The memory sort of gets a charge of whatever it is, adrenaline, and you remember things you haven't remembered in years.
Is another very noteworthy,
awesome guy.
Williams driver.
Like,
I don't know very much about him, so do you want to?
Nigel Mansell is the quintessential race car driver. Like, he's cocky.
He's the one with the mustache, right?
Big old Nigel Mansell.
Big
not
mustache.
Only is he quintessential race car driver, he could be Captain Britain. There's Captain America. He's this big, a lot of race car drivers are short. I believe he's over 6 foot.
He looks like a character that would be on a cereal box.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. He's this huge bushy mustache, and he's this big domineering figure, and he's very full of himself. And he was just he was I was literally listening to a podcast where they were talking about top 10 Williams drivers of the V10 era, and when they're discussing Nigel Mansell, one of the guys who was a Brit said, I really didn't like Mansell when I was younger, but that's because I was so anti-patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
It's I was very leftist when I was I didn't like nationalism, patriotism, and Nigel Mansell was such a national figure.
Yeah.
And he was so beloved by, as he described it, people who had their shirts off waving Union Jacks.
I mean, Williams was very national.
Absolutely.
They were a huge British team, and they had very big support from the British fans.
Yeah. But Mansell gets the benefit of, in 1992, he gets to drive arguably the greatest F1 car ever created, the FW14B.
Yeah.
I
talk
believe.
About that a lot. I think it was B.
Yeah, Nigel Mansell runs away with the championship. I mean, I think Flavio Briatore came second in the championship.
And that was his teammate?
That was his teammate. And, I mean, he finishes just ahead of, Schumacher's Benetton and maybe Prost's McLaren, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But, at the same time, he was well behind Mansell.
So Prost was at McLaren, and then he went to Williams, and then he went back to McLaren.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because Well, he retires.
he retired and
Retires
then
from
went
Williams
back to
and then makes a
McLaren.
return to
Yes,
McLaren.
right,
Yes.
right. I forgot about that.
Similarly, so when they bring in Prost for 1993, they outs Mansell from the team.
Yeah.
And I believe this happened after the midway point of the season.
So this is the year too that like he was dominating and they just like fucking got rid of him.
Yeah, it was just the relationship with him and Patrick Head had eroded to a point where Head wanted nothing to do with Mansell.
Wow.
And Prost is unhappy at McLaren, and they have the opportunity to bring in this driver who has won a world championship for them before in '87.
Yeah.
And bring back this beloved driver who they lose to McLaren, and then it's holy crap, we can get Allen back, and they jump on it, and Mansell's without a seat. So Mansell goes to race in America in the kart series, and Mansell wins the 1993 kart series, which is IndyCar.
Yeah.
So Mansell goes from being the world champion F1, and then the next season wins the IndyCar championship. And not only does he win the IndyCar championship, but the IndyCar series at the time, kart, like CART in all caps, kart. I don't remember what it stands for. It was, and this is the way IndyCar still is now. It's a mix between oval courses, like going around an oval like you would see stock cars do, but obviously it's still open wheel cars.
Yeah.
And race courses.
Right.
And Mansell largely wins the season because of his performance on ovals, which he had never raced on before. And it's not. I mean, you can ask people like Romain Grosjean, who's tried to make this transition in recent years. They'll tell you, like, it's not just something you can pick up. Racing on an oval is something completely different than any sort of racing, and it's not something he'd done. Detroit, which he wins, was an oval. He crashed it at the lead at Indianapolis. He, I think he went Charlotte, which is an oval. Like and I know this because someone recommended this. You can find it's the 1993 kart season. You can find the whole thing on YouTube. These races. And I've watched most of it. I sat down being like, I'm going to watch the whole season. And then, I didn't watch every race.
That's me with the 2010 F1 season right now. I watch it to fall asleep, but I keep I'll start it and then I fall asleep halfway through so that I still don't know who wins the races.
Yeah. That's
no
a lot
idea.
of what I was doing with the 93 kart season. But it's one of the coolest stories, I think, in motorsport. And Mansell, he comes to America, and everyone it was a cultural phenomenon for IndyCar time. This world champion coming over,
this British
and racing in America,
definition of a Brit.
And he's known he was known in F1 for being rude to the press and kind of a prima donna.
Yeah.
And he comes over to America, and everyone thinks he's going to be angsty and angry that he's in this lesser series, and he's just loving his life and so happy to be there, and was giving great interviews. And I mean, Nigel Mansell in 92-93 was a very yin and yang for how he was perceived in the two championships, but it was a very, very interesting figure in that time.
And then the other pretty notable one at Williams is Jacques Villeneuve.
I've always been passionate about racing and cars and racetrack and everything that goes with it since I was 5. I used to play with little Hot Wheels and Scalic tricks and design racetracks and carpets. That's all that existed from morning to night. I never, ever thought about doing anything else.
Jacques Villeneuve, another driver who competed in kart. Got his, I don't know if, obviously he raced in lesser series before that, but was racing in kart in 94, 95.
So he started in this weird oval, non-oval league.
Yeah, so he starts in the IndyCar kart, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And they bring him over in 96. Williams gets very convoluted in this time because, so in 92, Mansell wins the championship and they force Mansell out.
Right.
And Prost comes in. Prost is there for a season.
Yeah.
And then he retires, and they bring in Senna. Senna's there for 4 races, teammating Damon Hill. and then tragically loses his life. They elevate David Coulthard, who
Yeah.
was their reserve driver,
Yeah.
to teammate Hill. Hill, who I believe was like a Brabham, like he was racing at Brabham, and then Brabham collapsed and was maybe like testing for
Yeah,
Williams.
he didn't have a, like Hill's start was interesting because he also started a lot later. He started like
Yeah,
karting when he was like 12.
yeah. He was old. He's a obviously we talked about it. Graham Hill. His dad was a champion. He was a British national.
He did like two-wheel racing for a bit.
Interesting.
Yeah. He did
Like motorcycle
like
racing.
motorcycle racing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
He did that for a while and then he didn't get into like F1 until like I want to say he was like in his 20s, maybe early 30s.
Yeah.
Like late 20s, early
Yeah.
30s. Like he was old.
But he was kind of. But he was. Not only that, he was never supposed to be the number one.
Yeah.
Obviously
Yeah, yeah.
Senna's supposed to be number one, and he comes in and in '94, Coulthard gets elevated and splits time with Mansell. They have Mansell kind of. I think he only ran like 4 races. It might have been more than that, but like he runs like Monaco
Hmm.
and like a couple other ones. Like they just kind of had him coming back as a guest because Mansell wants to come back in '95,
Right.
but the team
They don't want
doesn't
him.
end up. He was just
Yeah.
too old. The team ends up not bringing Mansell back in '95. I think Coulthard leaves. I think he was he only there for a year?
I
He
think
might
so.
have been
Maybe
there for 2
two.
before he goes to McLaren.
Yeah. Well, because it was like a weird year and then maybe a full year.
Yeah, and then he leaves for McLaren, and that's when they bring over Jacques Villeneuve.
Yep.
And their cars in '96 are. Oh, sorry. So can you look up for me? Look up who they replace Graham Hill in 1997 or Damon Hill in 1997 with, because Villeneuve is there, already, but Damon Hill wins the championship. Oh yeah, that's what it's.
I've never heard
Heinz
this name.
Heinz Harold Frentzen. Heinz Harold Frentzen.
I've never heard of him.
Um, yeah. They tell Hill basically halfway through the season, even if you win the drivers' championship for us, we're bringing in Frentzen. There's nothing you can do. I think Hill like ends up taking the number one, to Arrows next year. I think is where he goes.
I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like this is now twice in the last 4 years that they had a driver win the
Win.
drivers' championship, and then they got rid of them the next year.
Yeah.
Not the driver moved
very
on
bizarre
to a
behavior.
different opportunity. Like one of the hallmarks for Williams in this time is they're always trying to sign the next big thing.
Yep. And they
constant.
did.
They do a lot of the time. With Villeneuve, they succeed. He gets a championship, and
Yep.
that obviously you have to still be a good race car driver, but I think a lot of people could have won in that the '97 car.
Yeah.
Yeah, the car in '96, '97 is pretty untouchable.
Mhm.
So Villeneuve just happens to be the guy in the right seat.
Right.
But he beats he beats a Schumacher Ferrari. He beats Mika Häkkinen McLaren. This is nothing, not to take away anything from him. It's not a lot of people were winning championships in that time frame, but the package that Adrian Newey put together, Newey leaves in '99, I believe. So this is one of the last William cars designed by Adrian Newey.
Was he at Ferrari before or after?
He was at Ferrari after.
So he pretty quickly went from Williams to Ferrari to Red Bull.
Yes.
All with championship winning cars. Adrian Newey's, I just haven't talked about him much yet. He's a very good engineer. Like, very good.
Yeah. He's more aero. He does the aero for these cars. And obviously engineering is involved with, the aerodynamics.
Yeah.
But
he does. He's like revolutionary in that sense. And that's
correct.
why like they had like all the wind tunnel stuff. And so they were able to like get ahead of the aerodynamics of the car. And he was able to help design the championship cars for Williams, Ferrari, and
McLaren. He was at McLaren in the
McLaren
80s.
and Red Bull. Like, and by championship winning cars, I mean the cars that were like fucking dominating.
Yeah.
Like no one
I
could
mean, like
touch them.
when we talk about the FW14B, which is like when we say, like, if you Google, like, what's the most dominant F1 car, I'm sure it's going to tell you that it's that one. Or, like, I guess maybe it could be one of the Mercedes in, like, the mid 2000s, but
Yeah.
mid 2010s, but it's the 92 FW14, and it's an Adrian New. He gets there in 91, I think. It's the first Williams car that he's the lead aero designer on.
Yeah.
And it's just right. I mean, he's a genius.
He's so incredibly smart and innovative.
And like things like if you hear someone talk about like a ground effects car or stuff like that, all these different eras of the sport, like those are Adrian Newey, innovations.
Yeah.
They're successful in the 80s, but the 90s is the golden era. The 90s into the 2000s is the golden era of Williams, because you have the Mansell Championship, and then you have the drama with Prost, and then obviously it's very sad with Senna, but you have the drama with Prost and Senna. That's the great rivalry of this time, and they both come through your team, and you get to be a part of that. And then you go straight into Damon Hill. You have a Brit winning, a championship for a British team. And it was awesome. You hear about. I say you hear about, but I listen to these journalists, from Britain. These F1 journalists talk about that at the time. A lot of the guys on the Bring Back V10, the guys that work for the race and stuff like that, talk about it. And Damon Hill, it was so cool for them. It was a British driver for a British team, and it was awesome. And then Villeneuve comes over, and he's this exciting driver from the Americas who kart had been getting pretty popular at the time. And then it's the kart champion coming over from the year before, and it's this young exciting driver, and then you go through that. And then he gets out of there, and you have guys like Ralf Schumacher come in, and Ralf Schumacher was very successful for Williams during this time. And then Ralph's teammate is another instance of actually I skipped one, is 2000 as a rookie. Teammate, I believe, to Ralph in 2000 is Jenson Button.
Yeah.
Jenson Button as a rookie, he's an F3 driver. It's his third year in cars. And Williams walks him and puts him in the other seat. Like, they're obsessed with driving the next big thing. Then he gets forced out the next year to bring in the new next big thing, which is Juan Pablo Montoya.
They have, like, you could argue it's like Red Bull level cutthroat, except they don't even have the, like, you perform, you stay.
No.
They're just like, bye.
No, if you perform and we don't like you, you're still out of here.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's
absolutely insane.
It's funny because a lot of the times it works.
I know a lot of times it works.
Like, Button has this great 2000, and then you bring in Montoya, but then you look at Juan Pablo Montoya from like 2001 and 2005, and it's like he's arguably the most exciting driver on the grid. He's not winning championships, but when he was winning races, and like he was so exciting when he was out there.
Yeah.
Except for 04. 04, that car sucked.
And now they've just really, really declined.
Yeah.
I mean,
but since then, it's been rough.
I've talked about them before as like Mercedes number 2 team, which is weird because they're not.
No,
they're not. They're their own thing. It's just Mercedes their connection is that Mercedes supplies their engines.
Mercedes is their engines.
Since 2014.
Since 2014. Back in the 90s, I believe it was Ford for most of the 90s.
I think so.
But yeah, Mercedes is their engine supplier. But it is fair to think of them as Mercedes Junior's team, especially.
But it's just weird talking about their history, even saying that they're like someone else's number 2 team.
I know, but it's they go through different cycles, but it's obviously Valtteri Bottas was driving at Williams before he was driving at Mercedes. George Russell, the current Mercedes driver, was at Williams before he was at Mercedes.
Yeah.
They do serve that role.
They do now.
The same way that Haas is kind of and Alpha have served that role for Ferrari.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely, now they do. It's just weird to think that there was a time where like they could have beaten Mercedes.
Yeah.
Current drivers, we have Alex Albon, who I really like, actually.
As a driver, you just like him, or both?
Uh, both. I don't think he's a super notable driver. No,
Yeah,
no offense to
I
him.
think
I think he's safe.
yeah, I
I like
like
that.
I don't think, I think what we see out of Albon is kind of what we get.
Yeah.
Like it's not like I'm waiting for him to break
As
out.
as a person, I think
I
he's
think he's
great.
great. I
He's
think he's
super
awesome.
nice. He's a big deal to his family and
Yeah.
his country.
He grew up in Britain, but his mother was an immigrant.
Yeah. And so in 2019, see, it's weird too, his story, because in 2019 he was at Toro Rosso.
Yeah.
And so he was on track to be at Red Bull, and he after 12 races.
Too soon.
Wait. Oh yeah, after 12 races at Toro Rosso, he went to Red Bull.
Red Bull gets
And then
bumped up to the parent team.
He did not perform well, and
No, and
they were brutal to him. They did it too soon.
He got into a car that I don't think anyone in the world not named Max Verstappen could drive.
Yeah.
That car was so tailored to Max that, I mean, putting anyone there and having expectations, let alone a first year driver, is just setting them up for failure.
Yeah. And so they very quickly replaced him with Pierre Gasly.
Yeah.
And he was out of a seat for the next season. He was a reserve driver.
Did he had a whole year off?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a reserve driver for Red Bull, and then he ended up signing with Williams, and in 2021...
Which was a big deal, too.
Sorry, in 2022, he went to Williams.
As further proof to Mercedes being... having a big stake in Williams, when Albon went there, it was a big deal. Christian Horner had to sign off on it. It was like, this was a Red Bull Academy, Red Bull controlled driver going to drive for a Mercedes controlled team.
Yeah.
It
was a big deal.
Yeah.
And he's done okay there.
He's done fine. I mean,
it's not the greatest car.
No, it's he's in a tough car. I mean, but like at the same time, he outperformed Latifi when they were teammates. But
I mean,
actually, were they teammates for a season? They were teammates for a season.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not saying a lot. But like, the bare minimum for staying in the sport is outperforming Nicholas Latifi.
Who I haven't even mentioned before. Nicholas Latifi was there for 2 seasons?
Maybe 2 seasons.
He was at Williams. They just needed someone.
There was a point in time, country of Canada, when your 2 drivers on the grid were Nicholas Latifi and Lance Stroll. So, thanks a lot, brothers up north.
Something I've learned recently is in Germany, they spell Canada with a K. And I just think
Canada with a K.
Yeah. I think, and they also spell America with a K.
Well, I don't speak German, but is the C a soft C in German? And like all the hard sounds are used with Ks?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Williams' other current driver is Logan Sargent, who's American.
USA.
He's definitely getting kicked out after this year. He's for sure gone.
Logan Sargent.
He was a great F2 driver. I think he only came in 4th, though, in the Drivers' Championship.
I saw someone suggest, obviously Logan Sargent. And not obviously. If I was a betting man, which I am, Logan Sargent's not going to have a drive next year.
Yeah.
As a generic white male from Middle America, I would love to see him on the vice presidential ticket. I think he's a great running mate for Kamala. He can really galvanize the voter base. He's the exact demographic that we're looking for.
Was that a tweet?
Logan Sargent, please contact your local DNC representative. We have a job opening for you.
I would vote for him. Logan Sargent, he was just brought up too soon. Honestly, that's his main thing, and he has not performed.
I think, but honestly, what I and this is really just dawning on me, God, I love that. Williams is still doing Williams things.
Yeah.
They're picking a driver, the only American in the sport. I believe they had to petition for him to even get his super license.
I think you're right because I think the
I don't
FIA said that he didn't have
enough
enough.
points on his super
Yeah, and
license, and I believe they had to like pull some strings to even get him in.
yeah, which is weird because it's not like he was good. Do not get me wrong, he was very very good, but like
It's like a weird version of like the next Williams bringing the next big thing, because it's like they went through all the steps that they usually go through to bring in the next big thing, but at the end of the day, everyone's looking at Logan Sargent, and it was like him. um,
yeah.
but
And unfortunately, he's just not performed. I
I will
keep
say,
thinking that he'll get it together, and he
I don't
just
think he will. I hope
hasn't.
he does, and I don't think he will.
Yeah.
I will say though, like when we were in Vegas, it was cool hearing how many people were cheering for Logan Sargent, as well
I agree.
as just whatever team they were there to support, simply because he was American.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't know, that's obviously the sport is trying to expand into America.
Very blatantly
Confusingly though,
obvious.
because they want to add races in Miami and Vegas that no one can afford to go to, but when Andretti wants to add an American team, apparently we're gonna do everything in our power to block them. So maybe pick how we want to expand. The American team that's not fucking Haas might help bring some fans in.
Yeah.
Especially people know the Andretti name.
Maybe get a better city that's less expensive.
Maybe stop putting races in cities.
Yeah.
Or around the parking lots of NFL stadiums.
Make a track.
And go run at tracks. Go run at Sebring in Florida. Go run at Forest Glen in New York. Like, there's options.
There are places.
There are historic tracks in America. Still the best race in America is the U.S. Grand Prix at Road America in Austin. It's great. A beautiful track.
Yep.
It's a great race.
Yeah. Yeah. Miami and Vegas, they are too expensive. They really are.
Yeah, and Vegas was cool. The Vegas race was cool. Like, it's a cool thing to look back on. Not only would I probably not go to Vegas again for the race, one, I would probably not go to Vegas again. That place is Gomorrah incarnate. It is not good for your soul. Just don't go to Las Vegas.
I was walking around, and you go from one casino to the next, and I was like, I could totally see how you lose all your money here.
One casino from the next. You walk out of the airplane,
and
there are slots.
Oh my god, there's slot
at
machines.
The gate.
Yeah, who's doing that, by the way?
There are slot machines.
If you're doing that, if you are using slot machines at the gate in the Vegas airport, please get your life together.
Please. Not only, but like, yeah, it's just a whole city built on sex, gambling, and drugs. Yeah. Legalized sex, legalized gambling, and drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And, it's... Anyway, I digress. I don't think I would like to go to Vegas again. I don't think I would want to go to the Miami race. I have so much more of a desire to go to Austin and go to Road America, or go up to Montreal and go to the, Gauze Villeneuve circuit, or even go down to Mexico City.
Yeah.
And see the race sit in the stadium in Mexico City. That would be awesome.
Montreal is where I'm trying to go next.
I want to, next summer, we'll go to Montreal.
That's what I would say. Yeah. We have to convince Dad. Yeah, so Logan Sargent's going to be out. So my question for you is, who do you think is going to take over, like, replace him? Like, Albon has already re-signed. Mm-hmm. So that other Williams seat, if Logan really is leaving, which I'm pretty sure he is one of the only seats left. And you still have, like, signs out there.
Yeah, I think that's more on Carlos than anything, if he feels like, Williams is beneath him or not.
Yeah.
If they have the opportunity to bring in Carlos Sainz, do it. I think he's an excellent driver.
I agree. I think it's possible that Sargent's going to end up at IndyCar.
I think there's a great chance Sargent ends up at IndyCar.
Yeah.
And IndyCar's a great series.
It is.
Like, I watched a couple IndyCar races last year, and damn if they're not entertaining.
I'm going to try to get into it next year.
Yeah, especially, the Indy 500 alone is awesome.
Yeah.
There's a good series on that just came out on Netflix about the Indy 500.
Yeah.
So the way the Indy 500 works is they have a full month for testing and qualifying,
Okay.
and then the race happens at the end of this month.
That's weird.
And it's that they came out with a docuseries, so following it this past year.
I like that. That's fun.
Yeah.
That's pretty. That's like a football camp.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, very much training camp vibes.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That'll definitely be entertaining.
Mm-hmm. And it used to be, I wish, FIA, if you see this, make the Indy 500 part of the Drivers' World Championship again.
That was the thing.
Please, 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 please. Yes, in the 70s.
Ooh.
And they
Yeah,
had,
do
they
that.
had there were specific teams that were like shadow F1 teams that like only like they weren't part of IndyCar and they weren't part of F1, but then they like developed cars for the Indy 500 and like F1 racer drivers would go for that like month. It was like during the summer break.
Yeah.
A lot of times. And they would go and they would race in the Indy 500, and then I believe what happened was they changed the date of it, and then I think it's run the same day as Monaco now.
Mm.
So one of the I believe I don't know if it's called a Grand Slam. I think it's called a Grand Slam. For race car drivers
Is Monaco, Le Mans, and
Monaco, Le
Indy
Mans,
500.
and Indy 500.
Yeah.
And I believe is Fernando Alonso the only active driver who has done it?
Has he gotten
He's-
Le Mans?
Oh, maybe he doesn't have Le Mans. I mean, he's definitely. I think he's won the Indy 500. He's definitely raced in it a lot.
And he's probably won Monaco.
He
I
has.
can't
won Monaco.
imagine. Yeah. So I don't know about Le Mans for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't think of anyone else currently that would have
Yeah, I don't
done
think,
that.
Yeah, I think Fernando. I love when some of those guys come over and race in America. Shout out, oh god, I'm blanking on his name. Kimi Räikkönen,
Yes.
NASCAR driver.
Yes. Shout
Kimi
out Kimi
Räikkönen, the
Räikkönen.
NASCAR,
The NASCAR driver.
the NASCAR driver, the New York financier.
Oh, I think that Williams' best bet right now. Well, actually, it's not even Williams' best bet. It's Mercedes' best bet, and this is what I think they should do if they are using Williams as
Kimi
their
Antonelli.
number 2 team. They need to bring in Kimi Antonelli for Williams. For the love of God, do not put that kid in the Mercedes seat. I'm so scared.
I'd rather
Just wait. Just
Why?
wait a second.
Why?
Just see how he does in the Williams for like half a season, and then bring him up.
You know, I get what you're saying.
That's even what they did with Max. They didn't put him in the Red Bull seat at 17.
I think maybe I've been listening to too much history of Williams in preparation for this, but the kid's gonna sink or swim.
I know he is, but like, let's see what he does first and don't fuck up Mercedes.
Okay, so what happens when you put him in the Williams and he underperforms there? Who's even in the Mercedes for the first half of the year?
I think that they should put signs in there. I want them to just let me pick the grid.
What? They just let you pick the grid?
Yeah.
Not let you pick the Williams driver pick.
No,
You
pick
want to
the
be too
grid.
principal. You want to be.
I want to pick the grid.
You want to have the most power in the history of the FIA. You want to make Bernie Eccleston look like a powerless puppet as you wheeled over, picking the entire grid.
What I want is just World
Lando
Cup.
Lewis, swap places.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah,
Just fuck around.
When I say I want to be involved in motorsport, what I mean is I want to be the most powerful and I pick what's happening.
Let me introduce you to the PC game Motorsport Manager. You will have a grand old time.
Awesome. This has been fun.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining.
Enjoyed watching all these episodes, and
You only watch half of them, don't lie.
I've enjoyed watching all of the parts of the episodes that I've seen, and I'm very happy to be a part of this.
Yeah. You'll watch this full one.
Honestly, I probably will watch less of this than I've watched any other episode. I cannot fathom watching myself talk for this long, and I don't think I ever will.
Fair. Well,